Ward. Here. Fisher.
Here.
Essing. Here. Butler.
Here.
Knopfinger.
Here.
McNabb.
Here.
Armstrong.
Here.
We have student council to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can you give us your name and what grade you are and what your student council is doing?
So I'm Josie Herman, and I'm the president of Student Council. I'm a senior here.
I'm Reagan Daniels, and I'm a senior here.
And then, so what we just finished was homecoming, as I'm sure you guys all know. So we had the community night on Wednesday night. The parade was on Friday, which you guys are probably well aware of. And then our dance was on Saturday. And then this year we actually had a record number of tickets sold. Usually it's like 600 tickets, but this year we had over 800 people attend. So we were very pumped about that.
Next, we're working on Boot Bash, which is on Monday, October 30th from 6 to 8. And all the clubs and sports have their own doors to hand out treats to all the kids. And then Student Council will be running games in the NPR for all the kids to play with while they're not getting their candy.
Do you know how many you expect for Food Bash? Because I know that's usually pretty hot.
I mean, it's from 6 to 8, and usually there's a constant flow of kids like
It's
walking
usually a line
around.
out the door waiting.
Your girl sounds so successful, we may not let you graduate.
Any other questions for the student council? All right, well, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Visitors and correspondence, we have the audit report.
Come on up.
Good evening. I'm Matt Cook with Cook Consultants, and we performed the audit of the district's financial statements as of June 30th, 2017. First of all, I just want to say I'm an accountant, and I'm about to talk about accounting. Okay? I most likely know what I'm talking about. Most likely. I'm not sure, though, sometimes. But I don't necessarily always do a great job of conveying that. So if I start to make no sense to you, or you don't understand something I say, don't be afraid to interrupt me or ask me questions at the end, because I start talking about accounting and I forget not everybody uses these terms every day. So I apologize in advance for that as well. But first of all, just want to, I don't know if you got them tonight, but you did receive two documents basically from us. One is the financial statements themselves, and a second document is the required communications from us, the auditor, to you, the board. I'm just going to hit a few highlights in both of those items. I'm not going to go in any sort of order or have you turn anywhere because I'm going to be kind of bouncing all over the place. But I'm hitting highlights of those. I do recommend that you read those because they do contain required communications. Both documents do. So from us to you. But I'm going to hit what I consider to be the most important things tonight. First of all, just a little background on what an audit is. Not everybody's always real sure of what an audit is, but basically the financial statements are management's representation of the financial activity and the financial position of the district. An auditor comes in and gives an independent opinion on those financial statements. We're basically giving reasonable assurance that those financial statements are free of material misstatement. Okay, and I do say reasonable assurance. It's not absolute assurance because I did not look at every transaction. We did not come in and look at everything. Well, we follow audit standards and we do tests of various items based on our planning, but we don't look at everything, so we're providing reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. So we did conduct our audit based on government auditing standards and generally accepted auditing standards. And as part of that audit, we did recommend, and administration did make these, we recommended a few adjustments and reclassifications to the financial information we were provided. Most of those were not material to the financial statements. A couple of those were. The first being we did recommend that management reclassify some special education expenditures that had been included in regular instruction expenditures, and we just asked that those be reclassified. And that's a little difficult of a concept to get around. To get a handle on, because looking at your financial statements every month, you don't necessarily see that. But for AFR purposes, which the AFR is prescribed by the Illinois State Board of Education, that's where they needed to be. So we did recommend that the management reclassify those. The other material reclassification involved, last year you issued some debt to refund bonds. So you received money in, and then it went right back out the door to pay off old bonds or to pay the cost of issuing the new bonds. We recommended that management go ahead and record that transaction in the general ledger and in the financial statements. It was a zero-sum game for you guys on a cash basis. It came in and went out, but we had management go ahead and include that in the financial statements. What that did, though, is push the debt service fund over budget for the year once we included those debt issuance costs. Because when the budget was calculated, you weren't figuring in including $250,000 in bond issuance costs. So those were the only material adjustments. None of the other, there's only, I shouldn't say none. There was one reclassification that required us to adjust fund balance. That was in the health insurance fund, and that was just related to some outstanding checks that the third-party administrator had voided, and those voids had not been recorded yet in the financial or in the general ledger of the district. So we recommended they go ahead and record those transactions as voided. So that increased the fund balance of the health insurance fund. Again, that was the only transactions that we had them adjust that affected fund balance. Everything else, the fund balance hasn't changed. Now, when I refer to fund balance, your financial statements are on the regulatory basis as prescribed by the Illinois State Board of Education on a cash basis. So your financial statements are not generally accepted accounting principles financial statements. They are a regulatory basis financial statement as prescribed by the Illinois State Board of Education. So when I say fund balance, since you're on the cash basis, that is just basically the cash and investments that is available in a fund at the end of the year. So again, I won't have you turn to the financial statements. Your financial results were very good for the year as far as I'm concerned. All of your operating funds, all your funds actually had positive cash flow for the year when you exclude transfers. So your fund balance actually increased in all your funds. Once you did do some transfers near the end of the year where you transferred money out of the educational fund and the transportation fund into the operations and maintenance fund. I think you're setting aside some money for some future replacements here, boilers and things like that. Once you did that, though, the operational fund, and the educational fund and the transportation fund did have a negative change in fund balance, but that's to be expected when you transfer that much money internally to another fund. The Illinois State Board of Education calculates a financial profile score based off of the information in your financial statements, and the estimated profile score for you guys for the district as of June 30th would be a 3.9 out of 4. So that 4 being the highest, so that's very good. It gives you recognition status, which is the highest of the 4 statuses you can achieve. The only area you didn't get a perfect score in is your ratio of outstanding long-term debt versus the amount. There's a cap on how much outstanding debt you can issue, and the gap between those is how they measure that one. So you get a 3 out of 4 on that calculation. So I'm not going to go into too much more in depth about those because there weren't that significant of changes from what you've already seen, other than the items I've already described to your financials. As part of the audit, we have to look at internal controls of the district. The purpose of that is to plan our audit and our procedures. It is not to give an opinion on the internal controls of the district. However, if we become aware of what's called a material weakness, we have to bring that to the board's attention. We also have to bring it to the public's attention in this case because it's a government auditing standards audit. So we did have one finding that we considered to be a material weakness, which is disclosed in the financial statements. For those of you who were here last year, it's a very familiar finding, and that's this concept of ideal segregation of duties. Basically, when you're designing an ideal situation for accounting controls, you would have the accounting and the treasury functions broken up against multiple individuals, so that no one individual or group of individuals controls too much of the process. unfortunately a very small office here, and so there are, and that's common throughout all school districts basically around here. So there are situations where there is not an ideal segregation of duties. Further, there are additional situations where sometimes there is an ideal segregation of duties. However, out of business necessity, if somebody's sick or if you need to process something quickly, some people have abilities or access to do things outside of their normal course of their job that would allow them additional access. Again, that's out of business necessity. It's common, but we just may be aware of that risk. We've talked about this at length with Joe and Dr. Sanders, sorry. And the bookkeepers, and in more detail than we'll go into in a public meeting. But they did make some significant changes even since last year when we had this comment, and just encourage them to make some additional changes. A lot of people automatically assume that we're referring to fraud risks and things like that. And this does present a fraud risk, but it also presents a risk where errors can be made that would cause the financial statements to be materially misstated. So we just encourage to continue looking at how duties are segregated, and if they can't be potentially additional reviews that can be put in place, or more comprehensive reviews. That includes reports being filed with Illinois State Board of Education or others. But yeah, just, it's a common issue for the board. The one thing you can do is, make sure you're reviewing financial statements and making sure that they're consistent with your expectations, with the budget, with what you've approved, and make sure you understand anything that's different from that. And then again, just to encourage management and the administration to follow up on those deficiencies. That's really all I had tonight. Does anybody have?
Maybe just to kind of dive into that one material, whatever. It's not that, it's maybe a timing thing rather than, we got controls in place that would identify if there were some issues, right, if they didn't want control for whatever reason. There was an issue there. It's not that we're completely exposed, I guess.
Completely exposed, absolutely not.
Okay.
And I don't.
In the course of a month, that would vet that out. Is that a fair statement?
In most situations, yes. What I guess we're pointing out is there are areas where just the nature of the beast, that things are, it's not that cut and dry. That there are times when people have access that if they really mess something up or wanted to, that they could do it. And that isn't so much on the fraud side. It's more on the just looking at how we sometimes if we classify a transaction wrong or submit a report with the wrong amounts on it. What are our controls in place to make sure that that those are being reviewed properly. One of the challenges in a small office like yours is we look to have and ideally everything gets reviewed by someone independent of the process that's familiar with what they're looking at. But a lot of times what you'll find is that everybody that's familiar with what they're looking at is already involved in the process. So you don't have access to an independent individual that also knows what's going on, that can review certain things. So this is just a risk we're bringing to your attention. And administration has done a considerable amount of work to mitigate this risk. But there are still areas where things could occur, whether it's collecting small fees in an office or things like that too.
Matt, is the only way to address that risk to increase the manpower to review those statements so that you can have enough people around?
The only way to completely get rid of that risk is most likely that. I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just suggesting that you be, one, aware of it, and two, look at what you have in place and how you could allocate your resources differently if possible, or add additional reviews if necessary, or more comprehensive reviews of certain things, whether those are spot checks or whatever. There are a variety of things you can do. I don't anticipate in a small district like this that this issue would ever completely go away. We may not call it a material weakness, but it is a risk that is going to present itself again and again, because, you have the basic financial transactions that take place, and usually those aren't where we have the issues. It's all the myriad of other things that go on in a school district, or unusual things, or reports that only get filed once a year, or things like that is where these issues generally crop up. Does that make sense? So just think of this as us making you aware of it and encouraging you to stay on top of it and to monitor it, and then administration to consider other reviews of things. I don't know if I made any sense at all. Like I said, I'll get out of the meeting sometimes and be like, they had no idea what I said. I really did. So, all right.
Any other questions?
One, so you mentioned there were 2 material reclassifications, I think.
Yes.
One was special ed, and then the second one was the debt service.
Yes.
And so I wondered about that debt service. Once you kind of reclassified those things and moved them around, are there any practical implications from that, or once that's done and there's just a little bit of a disequilibrium because of that, but going forward, no implications?
No, not as far as Okay, so the debt service one is one that we come across a lot, because what happens in a situation like that is, yes, you got cash, but you were never allowed to touch it because of agreements in the bond documents that said immediately it's going to get distributed to other people. So that is why it never made it to your general ledger, because it came in and went right back out to refund other debt or to pay the people you owe money to for issuing the debt. So we just capture it for financial statement purposes. So that's why we had to do an adjustment. The only ramification from that is that you did go over budget, which technically you're not supposed to do, but there's nothing you can do about it. This is on camera. It's very common in school districts to find the district's over budget. I mean, I would say 2/3 of the time I go to a school district and at least one of their funds is over budget, and it's not because of something like this, it's because they've been just overspent. And this is a unique situation where I'm not overly concerned about it, and I don't see any future ramification.
Thanks.
So.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thanks for explaining all that.
It was clear.
I hope so. I probably forgot the most important thing. All right. And I do want to say, because that's in there too, we had no issues with management, and they were great to work with, administration was, and we do appreciate that. They're always very willing to change. If we point something out, they don't mess around like, they change it. And we appreciate that, because a lot of times people hem and haw and get defensive, and they don't. So we do appreciate that. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Thank you very much.
Is that all you need me for, Joe?
Yeah.
Dr. Singer?
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board under visitors and correspondence tonight? Okay. We're moving on to reports. 5.1, department report, top rows, instructional media.
Good evening. Since I see I'm the only department report, I'm going to take my time and give you lots and lots of details, because I've got a lot to say. I always do. This is traditionally when the library does the department report, because in the past, in the fall, is when we apply for the school district library grant, and long ago, the board, it was a requirement of the librarian to report to the board about the grant, and the board actually used to sign off on it. They have simplified it to where none of that is required anymore, but I feel it's still important to notify you that there is a state library grant out there, and I have submitted actually just today the grant itself, as well as the fiscal year 2016 expenditure report, which I believe you both have. You have both of those in your packets. These funds come in normally around $750 to $800, somewhere in that range. It's all based on per capita. And basically, it's one of those grants where as long as the school district applies for it, then they generally receive it from the state. However, with that being said, the fiscal year 2017 numbers, I just checked with bookkeeping today, we have not received those funds yet, so those funds have gone unspent to this point. And we're not unique in that. Most school districts, in fact, I don't know that I'm aware of a school district that has received this grant for 2017 yet. However, the expenditure report for fiscal year 2016 states that we use these resources or these monies for electronic resources, which has been the tradition since before me being here. Sandy Wallace purchased electronic reference books for those, or with that, and so I've continued that trend, and it's my belief I wouldn't have continued it if I didn't believe that it was a good use of the money. Those electronic resources are usable by students here in the school as well as at home, and it's one resource that multiple students can use and check out at one time. So when the 17 funds come in, that's how I'll be using those funds as well. So to move on to the department report, wanted to give a little bit of my philosophy of the school library. I don't think I've talked to the board about that before. It's very short, but then I want to talk about the impact of the school library, and that discussion is a little bit longer. So my philosophy of the school library is that I feel like the school library is the heart of the school. It's a place where students can come from all different backgrounds, all different classes, to work and research here in the library. They can get the help with all of that, and they can also get the help with writing and other types of reports here in the library. But it's not just a space for students. It's also a place where the library has the ability to reach into the classroom and partner in lessons and classroom resources and collaborating with teachers. And I do that quite a bit, as I'll discuss a little bit later. And just I want to say, with that being my philosophy, I have to say that I feel completely supported by our teachers and staff and administration, that is what they want from the library here. And so I just appreciate being here and working in this environment. And so I want to say thank you. And now let me tell you about the impact of the library and the students of WCHS. As I mentioned, I spend many class hours in a week in the classrooms teaching a variety of topics, including website evaluation, database research, advanced database research, internet safety with all the freshman OTT classes, as well as special topics, such as recently I went in and saw all the sophomore English classes. I think I saw most every sophomore in the school talking about Banned Book Week in a presentation that talks about the students' rights and the freedom of speech and their freedoms as readers. And it's a really engaging, fun lesson, and I think it's a good use of time, and those teachers are always willing to have me come in for that. And so those are just a few of the topics that I talk about when I go into classrooms, but teachers invite me in some cases. In some cases I ask to come in, and they're always willing to let me, so I appreciate that. And one thing I want to note about that is all of that is able to happen, to have me absent from the library in other parts of the building, because you all have made the commitment to having a full-time staff member in the library. That is Maureen Eisenberg, and she's been here for many years. And I feel she does not just an excellent job because I see what she does, but I know she's also qualified educationally. Besides her experience of working in here, she also holds an LTA, Library Technical Assistance degree from ICC. And so with that support, I am able to take my expertise as a classroom teacher and librarian and meet with the students and have a double impact from the library on students. Another impact that we continue to work on, and every year it has been a process, and it has improved in my opinion, and that is creating an atmosphere of academic expectation in this space. I will say we've made some changes this year by bringing different resources into this part of the building. We've moved study hall downstairs, and this was in collaboration with Karen Stevens and Holly and a few other people. But we have more resources in the library area for support to students. And I'm very excited that the library has been included in that. And so So one of the big things was we need to make sure that the library has this academic expectation. And it has really turned out very well. Now, I will say this, not as a negative, it might sound like a negative. Our overall usage on an hour-to-hour basis, number of students in the library has gone down slightly. But in conversations and observation of the students who are using the library, what I would say is is the number of students engaged in productive work and reading in the library and checking out of books has gone up. Students come in and they see other students working, which instills an expectation. And so that has been a big positive. It's notable that it's a little bit more absent of students, but I think that will change over time as students learn that this is a place to get work done. This impact I'm really excited to talk about, and that is our databases. One thing I know from talking to college graduates who've come back to school here and former students of mine that have gone to college and come back and talk to me is, my first question to them is always, what did you wish you had from the library that you didn't? Or what was useful from the library that you took to college? And every one of them said was that expectation of research coming from credible sources, print or database sources. And so we have really pushed with financial support as well as support in me going out into the classroom. The database and talking about credible sources, and this is the exciting news. One of my representatives, Gail Cengage, is one of our main database vendors. We have about 5 of their databases here at the school. I just spoke with her last week, and I said to her, can you give me some kind of a comparison of how we rate with similar schools of our size in Central Illinois? And so she said, well, who's in your conference and who would you be interested in? So I gave her our conference as well as other notable schools in the area. And she said, in Central Illinois, and I don't know if this includes Bloomington or more, I think she was thinking Peoria. In Central Illinois, we have the highest use of databases for their company out of all schools. And this includes, within our conference, Pekin, Limestone, and Dunlap that are customers of hers. And so as an example, over the last 3 or 4 years, I look back in numbers clear back to 2014, normal database usage during our research months, which are the middle months of each semester, we traditionally have been hitting 5,000 to 6,000 searches a month during those research months. Well, last year, we had 2 of those months reach almost 10,000 searches. The big success, though, was last March, and let me tell you, I was tired last March because I was in classrooms constantly, but the numbers showed the results. Last March, we did 19,938 searches by students at WCHS. And what I was really excited about with that was that over 400 of those searches came from home. Not searches, I'm sorry, 400 of those logins came from home, which that's, oh man, I get goosebumps thinking about it. Our students are researching. They're learning that credible information, especially in today's world, that credible information is important to find. And using those print sources as well as those database sources are of utmost importance in their research. So impact. The library hosts 2 clubs. We have a book club and a game club. The book club has maintained a strong presence in the school. We've had 50 staff and students and staff involved in our book club over the last several years. And Maureen Eisenberg and our former librarian, Sandy Wallace, continues to come back. And they have a staff book club as well. And so I think that's exciting that community continues to grow. The Game Club is a club that I started 4 years ago when I came here, and it's a tabletop strategy board game club. And 4 years ago when I started, I had about 24 students that came to the first meeting and wanted to be a part of it. And the roster at the beginning of the year this year is sitting at 70 students. And one of the things I'm really excited about, why I want to talk about Game Club with you, is that we have turned it from just coming and collaborating and having fun after school with students who may not be involved in other activities in the school. We've taken it from that level to now I've tried to add some more academic levels to it, to where we are now writing, we're in the process and we're gearing up to start writing game reviews. So we're going to add a writing element to this, as well as we're bringing in some technology, and we're going to start creating video reviews, game setup videos, as well as game playthrough videos. And so really excited about those aspects. The kids are excited about those aspects. And so taking sort of a fun after-school activity and bringing some academic excitement into it as well. And speaking of the clubs, I wanted to mention that just this last weekend, our book club and game club collaborated, and this year on our third annual Star Wars Reads Day community event. We held it in the MPR, and despite some obstacles early in the day, we were able to manage over 130 students and kids and families that came, and we brought in some student athletes to read to kids Star Wars stories, which is so much fun, watching those student athletes. And we found some student athletes that have some pretty amazing reading talent, by the way. Other groups like the Drama Club came and performed at this event, and it was a great. It's just such a great opportunity to get kids, young kids up to our kids, excited about reading. And one more thing I'll talk about a little bit later is we also collaborated with the public library on this, and they piggybacked with the Star Wars Reads Day event that brought in over 100 people to their library in the afternoon. And they shared with me that that's probably one of their most popular events on record, recent records. So that was a good thing. I do have an impact, and I represent WCHS. I should say I have an impact. I feel I have an impact, and I do represent WCHS outside of the high school. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of what I do outside of the high school to represent us. First of all, as I mentioned, I collaborate with the Washington District Library. Besides just the Star Wars Reads Day, I collaborated on a grant with the library director over there for a 3D printer. We're still waiting on the results of that. Emily comes over from the public library to join in our book club discussions every month. I serve on the board of directors of the Illinois School Library Media Association, and I'm on the marketing rep and the conference committee there. I'm the president of the local chapter of the Illinois Computing Educators chapter, Heart of Illinois chapter, and I'm also the liaison between those state organizations as well. I sit on the LTA Advisory Board at ICC, and that's the Library Technical Assistance Library Board at ICC. And I'm currently hosting a practicum student from the University of Illinois who has joined us today to learn about what a school board meeting is all about. And she might be learning that maybe we need to keep our comments a little shorter next time. I represent WCHS through presenting at multiple conferences, including the Peoria County Institute, the ISLMA State Conference, the ICE State Conference. And in the school, I sit on the writing committee, as well as the technology committee, and I've been participating in the Project Chris training as well. So moving forward, this is where we're headed, and I'm almost done. I'm in the planning and implementation stage, and been working with Mrs. Stevens on this and creating library seminars to cover topics of benefit with students in a fun and engaging way. Trying to capture, as I mentioned, we brought resources into the area between student peer tutoring and math lab and study hall. Our plan is to capture some of those study hall students and invite them to the library to take part in different library seminars and topics that would be a supplement to their education, and maybe even find timely topics such as presenting using visual aids and topics like that. Using the ebook catalog, or just using our online catalog, or maybe some advanced research type of topics, but doing it in a fun and engaging way. And now also reaching our freshman PAC students with supplemental lessons also to support their academics, organization, and technology use through Google for Education. I'm in the middle of I developed a couple years ago a 5-year weeding plan. And weeding plan is library talk for removal of print materials and replacement of print materials. And so I'm in the middle of a 5-year plan for that. And basically the whole goal of that, it's always heartbreaking to remove books from a library. It's not a fun thing for me to do. But at the same time, it's exciting to see the shelves open up and see fresh new books And so to give you an idea what that looks like, if you look at those shelves there that have not been weeded versus these shelves over here that have a little bit more space and breathing room, they're more inviting to students. I get more students looking at this section this year than I do this section. And it's because I feel it's more user-friendly. It's easier to see, it has newer books, it's easier to find those new books. And so that's a 5-year plan, and I'm starting year 3 of that weeding plan right now. We will continue to try to come up with new promotions and continue the promotions that students seem to enjoy to encourage reading and engagement in the library. And finally, I just want to thank you, the Board of Education and Administration, of the support of this library program. And do you have any questions for me regarding my short report?
I have a comment. First thing I saw when I walked in here tonight was all the pictures. I was on a Board of Trustee committee in a local institution of higher learning, and many of those people are not educators. They come from various backgrounds. And I had the opportunity to talk to the head of the library later. But the questions there almost were, why do we still have a library? Because we don't need this print material. And I thought, what a generalization, because they just assume now with computers, you don't need books. And I got to talk to the head of the library later, and he said, it's kind of a battle for me to educate them in their world, to help them understand that it isn't just computers, it's databases, all the things you talked about. And it is still books, it's magazines, it's still print material. So I like our philosophy here of all the books, the pages of print that are still available here, and I can see that's your philosophy.
Yes, and to support that, our interlibrary loan numbers are always very strong. And most of those books are coming from students who are researching, and we don't have the print material here, so we interlibrary loan those from other public libraries and other school libraries. And so, yeah, print material, while perception is outdated, it's still very relevant in today's world.
And I have to mention in staff. I know there's quite a few staff that have utilized the interlibrary loan and the database system. It's very true. A lot.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for putting the Star Wars replay together. I went to it, and it was a lot of fun. I would have liked to stay longer, but I had another engagement I had to go to. But one thing that you did this year that you hadn't done in the past was the scavenger hunt.
Yes.
And I had a lot of kids like that, so if you look at it in the future, that was the one that I heard that they really liked. So thanks for doing that for all
Absolutely. Thank
the
you.
kiddos in the community.
It's my pleasure.
A lot of new creative ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah, you run a very dynamic program, it sounds like. I have 2 kids that go here, and I didn't know that this was necessarily tied to you, but in listening to you, I realized that things that they come home and talk about are things that you're involved in, so that's really neat.
Good.
And you're reaching out to the classrooms as a sort of digital librarian, and everything is very forward-thinking, so that's very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dean's reports, we have them in the packets for enrollment report, and did we need to talk about
Just general reports.
that? Okay. Moving on to 5.3, financial report, Dr. Joe Singlet.
Okay, I've changed things up on that this year. I'm putting together some new reports, so I'll gladly take your feedback and break from the reports that I've put together over the last couple of years. And so I'm going with more of a dashboard or a snapshot, and I'll just hit a couple of the highlights here. Instead of reporting the expenses by fund, which the education fund accounts for such a large percentage of this, what I wanted to do is break it out by category. And so I've been working with Julie Puckett, spent a lot of time taking our database and dumping this one in here. So on the sheet that you all have, and this is also out on our website underneath the financial dashboard, and you click on that, it'll bring up this in PDF form. I've got a couple of notes at the top. Those are just important things. You know, look, our auditor was here to talk about the audit, and so that's captured forever in time. We have received 5 general state aid payments, which is good. And so on the left-hand side are the expenses year-to-date. On the right-hand side are the revenues that we've received. And I wanted to get this to the board so that you can see the sources of funds, where they're coming in at, and if where we have budgeted and where the shortfalls may come as we progress through the year, okay? If you flip it on over, on the back side is the investment report. That didn't change much other than the layout. And then I also wanted to include insurance. The insurance committee meets once a month, and there's a lot of good information that is captured in this, but I never reported this to the entire board, so I figured I'll go ahead and throw the insurance report on there. And that takes us from not school year, but that's calendar year. So our insurance, the way we track that is January 1 and already through August 31st. And so I'll gladly take your feedback if there's something else that you'd like to see, or if you know, we got school board convention coming up in just over a month. It's hard to believe if you go and attend something on finance that you want to see done. Give me a sample of it, and this is a work in progress, but I think I'd like to move this direction instead of having 3 or 4 separate reports that I'd send your way. Okay?
Any questions for Dr. Sager?
I like the dashboard.
At the very top, the bar graphs up there just show where we're at, expenditures and revenues received, and then a comparison to the prior year. I think that tells a pretty good story along the way.
Moving on to 5.4, board committee reports. Committees that met was curriculum and insurance, I believe. And you got a summary of curriculum that Lorraine, do you want to?
I have. I'm going to just cover what we covered briefly, because if you look at the next portion of our agenda, some of these are going to be discussed in detail. So some of the history, we talked about the top 10. And just backing up a little bit there, at one time the teachers were very interested in looking at our top 10 designation, because they had identified, they thought, some problems with it that had an effect on course selection and so forth, and pressure and various things that and we didn't follow up as a curriculum committee at that time. But since then, we're finding that that is a popular topic of discussion in other schools, and we made some changes in other surrounding schools. So we did bring it up again because we didn't feel we had closure on it. We talked about the advantages and disadvantages of exploring other alternatives, top 10. We talked about what other districts are doing and what colleges are doing, and looking at the credentials of students who enter. We talked about the potential process we can go through involving faculty, students. We want to broaden this to have a very broad discussion about this topic, to get a lot of input. So when we make a decision, we could change it, whatever, we can have a lot of support at that time. We don't want it to be a controversial issue. We want it to be something that's enhancing our school. And we recommended that the board and administration conduct a study to explore what's available in our current practices to start the process. We also talked about discussing the determination status of weighted grades, and we had a document presented to us that was well thought out and a really good start in detailing that. And also the possibility of a few added honors courses for those already in doctorate. So with that, I'll wait there then and continue this later in the agenda.
Anybody else want to come forward? Did you okay. Insurance committee met.
I wasn't at that meeting.
I was.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we went over the trust, which is in fine shape, so that's it. Dr. Sanders told me the rest about health, so it's in good shape.
You know, this graphic here is shared out with there's something that didn't copy on over. This black line that goes across, that's what I like to call the break-even line. The bars represent the expenditures out of the health trust. The black line is about how much revenue is deposited into the health trust each month. So when we're below the line, that means we're adding to our health trust fund. If we go above that, then we've got more expenditures. Now, we have to keep in mind, some of those expenditures are reimbursable if we hit our stop-loss maximum, okay? And so we've done quite well this year in the health trust, and we've got a fund balance that was right around $800,000. And so that's a dramatic turnaround. That's the target that we were aiming for when we made the changes to the health trust or our health premiums a year and a half ago. And so it's had the desired effect. And so we're going in the right direction.
Let's see. Discussion and informational items, 6.1 architectural services. Dr. Freeman?
Okay, I handed out a sheet to you. As you can see, we had 9 companies that were interested in talking to us about architectural services. I went through this 2 ways, and so you have total scores based on numeric values, and then you have another one based on ranks selected by each of the individual board members as you went through. My actual recommendation on this would be probably to go with the rank scores because I think they're going to be a little more accurate than the numeric scores. If you look, you'll notice that the Farnsworth Group had 5 people that rated it in the top 3 categories. So I think for sure we want to talk to them. And then 2 other companies, BLVD and Kenyon and Associates, had 4 people who ranked them in the top 3 categories. And so at this point, I would suggest, if we're going to go with the top 3, that we talk to those 3 organizations. If everybody's in agreement with that, the next thing I need to do is figure out when, because that is a board decision, so we need to set up a meeting to do that. So it'll probably be a special meeting where they come in and talk to us all about what they have to offer so we can start to make a determination of where we want to go. So what I will do is I will push out some information to you, just calendar research on when you might be available. And I was thinking within a couple of weeks. We're trying to keep all this moving. Every week we go without it. Every week we haven't made an architectural selection is another week where we might need an architect. So I'm along the lines of let's keep this moving so we can get this process done. We have a lot of things that we need to move forward on, and we still have to go through the engineering into this same discussion.
So would you put all 3 of them on?
That would be my goal, yes. I think what we would probably do is figure, and my suggestion, we stick hard and fast to an hour apiece. You give an hour, that's plenty of time to talk about the company and what they provide. If you go much beyond that, you've gone from like a 5 to 8 meeting to like a 5 to 9 or 5 to 10. That's a long time to sit here. And I don't think it'll give people, when you get to the end of the night like that, that last group in there is really a disagreement stuff because everybody's kind of worn out by that point. So I would say if we could do that and start around that 5, 6 o'clock and have it done in a good scope of time, that will be the best way to do it. We can just meet with them, hear what they offer, hear what they have to say about. Remember, when we go through this process, there are a lot of legalities to it. We can't talk to them about money. That's reality. So we want to hear what they have to offer, and then we rate based on what we think is most acceptable. And at that point, once you've determined on 1, 2, and 3, we can begin the process of negotiating cost established. Most architects are going to work on a percentage, by the way, a percentage of your project. So that's just a heads up. believe it or not, there's not really a huge variance between the groups. They're all going to be pretty similar in what they ask, so.
Well, of all the people that submitted for proposals, they were all very qualified and a lot of material to go through. And I took quite a bit of time to go through, as I'm sure all of you did, and I thank you for taking the time. It looks like we've kind of narrowed it down little by just reading through all the literature and any homework that you did on your own decisions.
One comment I'd like to add, can we have Ryan with us on this? Because I feel like he's really knowledgeable, probably more so than we are. And I really respect his opinion, so I'd like to keep him present.
I think he also worked with one of these, I don't remember which one, but he had experience with.
I know he's worked at least with the LDD, but
I think he's worked with the Farnsworth Group.
That's
Also,
it, that was it.
okay.
IICC.
And so what I'd like to look at, because we are coming towards the end of October now, is if we could look at the week of the 23rd or the week of the 30th. So, like I said, I'll send out some information to you, and we'll figure out the best night for it. It all has to be posted publicly, but once I can determine how to get it together, we'll get it together. We might just, there are a lot of events on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So, I'm trying to narrow this down a little bit for you. Okay, so anyway, not that I'm picky about this, but I'm just trying to help focus this in.
If you could get us out an email, then we can.
Yes. I appreciate it.
I have one question.
Yes.
So it seems like when we hire an architect, we're looking at two big, we're looking at kind of how to manage a larger project and then even smaller renovation type projects, and when large things break down,
Yes.
stop working. And then there's also the life safety stuff.
Yes.
So Farnsworth, since Farnsworth is one of the top ones, they really emphasize only their construction aspect, the renovation and build. But do they also do the health, life safety stuff and the smaller kind of things?
I believe so, but that's a question we'll need to ask them directly. That's all part of the interview process. You know, what you're basically doing right now is layering out who you want to talk to. And then within that discussion, you make a determination from there on who you want to work with. You know, I think most of these groups have had some work with health, life safety. That's pretty standard. When you put out for architectural bids, I will tell you, they're going to highlight the things that they see as more exciting, more interesting to the board, more bang. Yeah, and that's going to be their project work. So reality of it, the grind of health, life, safety isn't nearly as exciting. Okay, so, but that's also a very important point, and it's one that needs to be considered when we get into these discussions with the architectural firms. Because a lot you're going to need is health, life, safety.
And we'd be up for health, life, safety.
2019.
2019. Years coming up.
Yeah.
That's every 10 years, right? Any other questions on architectural services? 6.2, possible addition of honor classes to curriculum.
I'm going to wrap 6.2 and 6.3 together because through the course of this conversation, you're going to hear echoes of both. So let's talk first of all about the honors classes, but understand that where it came from was a discussion about top 10. So here's the gist of it in high school. Right now, our kids who are fighting for a top 10 position are anchored into a very rigid curriculum. And one of the discussions that we've had over the years is how do we spread that out? How do we give them a greater variety? How do we allow them the opportunity to explore what they might be interested in? For example, if you sit down and talk to a lot of our top 10 students that want to go into business, you hear that time and time again. But I can tell you a large number of them have never taken a business class in high school when they graduate. And so that's part of the discussion here, is how do we get things to where students can reach out and try something different. So meeting with the department chairs and talking through things over time, we talked about the potential of adding honors programs in some of the non-core areas. But we're talking capstone programs, provided that the expectations and the standards, I'm trying to get away from the word rigor because I think what we're really talking about are expectations for kids, have increased to qualify that course for an honors course. We know that we have classes right now where kids are working tremendously hard at what they do, and that their classes that they aren't given honors weight for. And so the discussion was, how can we put together a set of criteria to determine which classes would qualify for honors weight? Now, in your Friday letter, I gave you a copy of a document that we worked through with the department chairs on, that outline the criteria that we would put in place. Now, let's talk a little bit about the procedure. If we are going to activate this, and this is where I think we need to go, we aren't talking about wholesale changes where half of every department is now an honors course. We're not watering it down to that degree. We are still talking about capstone high-level courses in some of the electives. The process, though, itself also comes into play, because within the process, there has to be a change that it goes through. So, we have the criteria laid out. What would happen if a department has somebody who wants to apply for honor status for their class? And that's the best way to put what they're going to do. They would bring that to their department chair, who then brings it to the administration. We sit down and look at where we're at and start to make recommendations or determinations. It could be determined right there, no, we're not willing to go that direction. But frequently what we'll do is bring that then to the next level, which will be the department chairs. They sit over and meet with and interview the people that are applying for it, talk to them about, well, how is this higher level? What does this mean for your expectations? How do we know that this isn't going to become an honors class that's really easy? Okay, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but at the same time, if it is going to provide honor status, the idea is that the class itself has higher expectations than the other classes around it. So you have to have a pretty strong set of expectations in order for that to occur. So once it goes through that, then it would go to the curriculum committee, where we would sit down, and then the curriculum committee makes a recommendation to the board, and the board then finally acts on it, and that's how it becomes honors. In order to maintain honor status, we also need to reevaluate these courses from time to time. Because I do think that it's easy for a plan to come into play, and yes, that's what it starts to look like, but then over time it degrades. It's very important if we're going to maintain the fidelity of these programs, that we actually review what's going on in those classes to make sure that we are maintaining the expectations. Sometimes you get a change in personnel that causes a change in expectations. Sometimes it's other outside factors. But in order for us to do this and do it well, we're going to have to go through some form of a process. So that ties us back then to a greater discussion that stemmed from the honors discussion, which is the top 10 itself. Do we continue with the practice of a top 10? And it's a great question. I actually came from a very high-performing district that didn't have a top 10 designation. Instead, they designated summa, magna, and cum laude, much like the universities do. They didn't have a valedictorian, they didn't have a salutatorian, and the battle for the top 10 changed. Because now, that's a designation that, believe it or not, really only applies to graduation. As we've done some research over the past at scholarships that are offered by universities, we found that a large number of universities don't even ask for that. And the top 10 designation doesn't apply to anything to get you a higher scholarship. So, they're looking at GPA. They're looking at your entrance exam scores, ACTs, SATs. In some cases, they might look at the percentage in your graduating class. Are you in the top 15, 20, 25%? So Those are the things that we need to research. Now, I'm going to double back. If we were to take that approach, that would end the tight line on that top 10 curriculum. But having said that, the next question you might ask yourself is whether you maintain an honors curriculum. There has to be incentive for an honors class. Because I've seen this in former districts also. If there is no incentive for an honors class, you will run into a case where kids begin to question, well, why would I take AP Physics? Why would I put myself through the potential of earning a B in that class when I can go through physics and get it? And that's a realistic thing that occurs. And we don't want that either because we want our students to stretch themselves. The purpose for the honors curriculum is to give them a reason for why they should take that more difficult course. Because if you can earn a higher GPA for it, a B is an A. You know what I'm saying? If we're on a 5-point scale like we provide, a B is a 4-point, which is, by the way, A in a non-honors curriculum. So that's the incentive for taking it. And we need to maintain that because we want those kids up in that upper. Okay, so I've thrown a lot out there. I said that I'd go through a quick walkthrough on this. Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody want to jump in and talk about anything along those lines?
I think it's an ongoing discussion. We have multiple schools, not just our own.
Very true.
As I looked into it prior when I was in the curriculum committee, many schools have, when we hit the top 10, but I'm sure in our conference, how many left do you think? Did you look at that?
I think there are a couple, but I don't know that we have a direct answer on how many in the conference have removed their top 10.
You know, I'm most familiar with Morton. I'm not familiar with anyone else that has.
Still has top 10.
I believe so.
So many.
Yeah. It's become more popular in the suburbs. Some of the more progressive schools in the suburbs. Morton made the change several years ago as well.
So we're seeing more and more of it throughout the state, and it's all for the same reason, because when you're vying for that top 10 status, you are stuck to a very rigid line of curriculum.
But it does not take away academic recognition.
No.
There is, if we go this way, there would be something else. But it would still recognize those students who work very hard for their GPA.
Yes.
I don't have any objections to exploring it. I do think it's something that's valuable to get input from community members on, because I think it may be more significant to some members of the community than we
Yes.
realize.
Yeah.
And so we need to get that input.
That's what we recognize in our discussion too.
But I think they need to know too, that, like, as Dr. Freeman was saying, that schools, colleges are not really looking at the top 10. And I think that's important. I don't think people realize that.
So I think it becomes valuable on many levels to have this larger conversation with the community. One, it's education. Because we can actually do the research, we can actually, you know, we have limited resources on what we can do to research. So we ask our folks to do it, and they do it within their time, they do a great job. But we're limited in the scope. We bring a lot of voices into the room. There's no reason why we can't assign everybody 5-10 colleges, call them up, find out, and have a much greater data pool to draw from, which gives you more power in that discussion.
Yeah, and I think we want to be sure we're identifying what we're trying to fix, right?
Yeah.
So I agree, colleges aren't looking to see if you're in the top 10 people in their class, but they do look at rank. They do look at percentages. And so if we're talking about doing away with the rank with the percentages of where people fall in a class, I think that's a different discussion than whether you have a student 1 versus student 10 and evaluating that's how you go.
I think
those are two different.
Yeah, two things to that, though. Number one, actually, I think Karen said they don't look at rank as much as you think. Didn't you say there's only a couple schools that more than only had to us that a couple times? So that's all part of it. You have to like educate the community that that really isn't, you know, if you're 40th in a class in Princeville where there's 60 kids versus 40th in, so rank isn't as big a deal as.
Yeah, but then, and maybe I'm misinformed on that. But I think that's a different conversation with the public.
It is.
Because when I hear the conversation, we're getting away, we may do away with 1 through 10 in valedictorian side, that's one thing. To say there's not any ranking system.
Well, no, there would be a ranking, it just wouldn't be as public. So if a college wanted to know where you rank, we'd still have that information. It's not like we have no idea where you
Right,
rank.
and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we're not doing away with the ranking system, we're doing away with the designation of
Okay,
1
right,
through 10 students.
Well, and at this point,
We're not doing
we're not doing anything.
Right, so that's what-
And so, I think that's the most important part, is the exploration and the conversation about, is this a direction we want to go? You know, and I do think that you make very valid points, and I do think there will be people in the community who really have strong opinions on this, pro or against. And so, working everybody through and getting the opportunity to sit down and talk through it is going to be part of what we need to do.
We recognize that the group that will probably be the hardest to change is tradition, and it is the older, the parents and older people, because that's what they've always experienced. So it has to be an slow educational process.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of impact on students. We're talking about a potential change that should impact 10 people, right? As opposed to a change in doing away with ranking, doing away with weighted courses, that impacts a much larger percentage of your population. So that's why I'm saying it's just important to articulate exactly what we're talking about. It's a smaller subset than what some people like.
I think you're right on that too, because I do think that the number of kids who are actually vying for that top 10 slot starts out large and narrows quickly, real quickly, to the point that it gets down to maybe 15 kids in the senior class.
Well, and with the designation of creative communities, they can work to the level that potentially could be more than a top 10 with the highest rank.
And truly, one thing that everybody needs to remember is all those designations matter in our graduation ceremony. Beyond the scope of that, they don't carry a lot of weight.
Other than the student knows how hard it took to get there.
Student-
Which hopefully would help drive them maybe to take the weighted
That's
classes.
right.
But if you do it with no designation, then.
Well, and I think it's important, I also think that opening up the opportunity for weighted classes, for honors classes in some other areas may bring some kids in to those other areas. And if they have some success there, they may begin to relook at the way they do things and say, well, if I'm capable of this, I might be capable of more here, and here. Incentive, and that's the ultimate goal. I think what we're trying to do is ultimately provide more opportunity. That's really what we're trying to do, provide more opportunity. So,
And I would even say, I mean, the conversation quickly starts to look like we're getting away with, we're looking at getting rid of the top 10, but really, we're looking at how we educate kids. Everything we do is for a purpose. And really, over the last 10 years, with the addition of the honors courses and bleeding everything, and I don't know how long we've been doing that, but it's just changing a lot. And so when you start changing all these other things, it makes you look at everything. What makes most sense is really a discussion about how do we incentivize students within our school. And I mean, I think that's what the discussion is. And one of the things that comes to the top is that top 10 stuff. I think it's how do we incentivize our students to achieve the equating product, so.
and ultimately, it's a review of our own practices. And that's what we'll be doing. We're reviewing our practices. Do we like them? Do we not like them? What are our options?
And are they achieving their purpose?
That's right.
So I wanted to add one thought, because curriculum about the honors courses,
Okay.
as you guys go forward and talk about this as an administration. So when we talk about adding honors courses, it's exciting to think of the new opportunities for kids to enter an honors course in an area that didn't exist before, and kids who don't normally take honors. But I just wondered, one of the things with core academic subjects is there's so many courses there that there's always going to be algebra and then algebra honors. But where you have econ, for example, I mean, if we have econ 1 and 2 now, and then we make econ 2 honors as a capstone, are we preventing some kids from taking econ 2 who don't want to participate at the honors level. It's just, I don't know if that's coming into play, but I imagine a lot less kids obviously take econ than math, right? So,
It's a grad requirement that students have to take econ through the state of Illinois. So we already have the consumer econ, which is an academic, and we actually have econ honors. We offer that, but I think it would come down to the prerequisites. So your question being, so if we would say business law, we want an honors business law and an academic, would that preclude students from taking it? I think we would have to be very thoughtful about the prerequisites that we put in place before students can take the class.
And because that's its core area, I'm going to take you outside of the core and talk about something that I can perceive happening. And we'll just talk band. We have a high band, okay? The high band will still be the high band. In order to earn honor status, they may ask for some research component to be additional to that high band. That high band right now is the expectations are very high. Those kids work extremely hard on that. And they work all the time on that. And I do compare what they do to similar time consumption as what our athletes do for their sport of choice, because it is very similar. The time they put in on their own is huge. Okay, so knowing that there's a research component, what that basically means is the high band itself could be stratified, so that yes, you have a kid that's just wanting to do the standard high band walkthrough, but the kid that wants the honors credit may take on a little bit of independent study aspect to it, some form. That is kind of where the discussion is going. That is what you were saying, providing for a base level and then an extension above.
yeah, that's great. I mean, and the same thing in art. I mean, I saw, when we talked about a curriculum, I saw the possibility we were at, but then as I started to think about it over the last week or two, I thought there's a limiting aspect to it, but it sounds like you're aware of that, so that's great.
I think it would be beneficial if the board members didn't take advantage of it, that sheet that you gave us about the criteria. I thought that was really important because we want to keep in mind that, as you said, we're not trying to just make more on paper, make more honors courses on paper. Our reason, our goal is really very important. And the difficulty level has to be challenging, or it isn't an honors course. If it's same old with just a little bit added. And I think that is a very important document, what we're talking about here. We talked about that at length in our meeting, and I think that the board knowing that document and looking at it to see if they see what we're trying to do or have need clarification is important as we go through these discussions.
We did talk about potentially doing this last year. And at one point, the department chairs were geared up and ready to move on it. We were asked to put it on the table for a year. So what we are doing now is just, we're running out of time. So we need to move forward, and that's what this discussion is about tonight. It's still an administrative procedure, so I'm not necessarily looking for board action on it. But if the board is against it, I would like to know that too. So at least I have some direction and I know that there needs to be further communication here and discussion. But I would like to be able to proceed with this because I do think in the end it's going to benefit our students. It will allow some of our kids who currently feel like they're pigeonholed into taking specific courses. We have cases right now, examples of kids who've dropped programs like band and art, programs that they want to go into and study because they couldn't get weighted grades out of it. And that's not good for kids. So this is one way where we can at least make an immediate change that would benefit some students. Well, immediate, not this year, but immediate next year. You know, we do have a process, but that's pretty quick turnaround for a school district. You know, I've said it before, we're an aircraft carrier, we turn it slowly.
Is this something that we would ultimately vote on?
You always vote on the classes.
So when do we have to have this done by?
I can start moving. We would need to have a final decision made in the December meeting to get it on the course of studies. So right now, I'm aware of maybe, I think two. I've got two in the world of fine arts and one of them, so.
Oh, I forgot about that. The other one. I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
So
That's a big.
So this would be adding classes to have the honor status?
Yes.
That's all.
Current courses that we have that are applying for AP status.
That's the decision we need to make by December.
Yes.
It's gonna be hypothetical, we're talking about different things.
Yes, we
By
are.
December, we need to make a decision about whether we can or should add some additional honors or and/or AP classes.
Yes.
Right.
That's what I was.
The second question has to do with, going to go with the top 10, and we're going to get some input from you.
And-
We're not trying to shoehorn that in, but
No, no.
that's why
You
you.
will be able to shoehorn that in by
I
December.
agree.
And it's going to take a little time to get, that might be something that takes more like 12 months. So,
Thanks for that clarification. That's like, we're always talking about honor
yeah,
classes.
yeah, we are, and that's really only for us, that's our version of a quick fix as we move forward to what we think might be a more substantial fix.
And it was discussed last year, it's not like this just came up a month ago or something,
Correct.
right?
Correct. We developed that guide document last year, so. Does anybody have any issues with us moving forward on applying for honor status for a few courses? Okay, perfect. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Moving on to 6.4 other, is there any other topics of conversation that anyone would like to talk about?
I might mention that I went to Central, they had a speaker there, a guy they brought in who was a retired coach and athletic director that just kind of talked about some of the trends now and expectations of parents and student athletes and things that he's found to be really, really successful. And he actually travels, I guess, around the country and speaks to people, has some different programs depending on what your focus is, and I thought it was real valuable information, so I thought that was really something maybe I would love to see, maybe not our district, but the whole community embrace something like that. It was a really neat program. I think a lot of people hopefully got a lot out of it. So,
I have spoken to him. He was
yeah, he did a really nice
very
job.
knowledgeable.
I was just going to follow through with Maddie Adams that talked to us last month, and we had brought her onto an advisory committee, is that correct?
Yeah.
And so she's helping me with some ideas on suicide awareness and I was contacted by a company called Project 375, and it's a mental health awareness, and it's put on by Brandon Marshall, who's an NFL football player, and he was anxious to talk and send us some literature, so I will pass that on to you when I get it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Any other? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda then, which is 7. Let's see what's on here. We're looking for, let's see, the consent agenda. Okay.
Regular board.
Okay, the consent agenda, we would be doing the minutes of the 7.11 regular board meeting minutes, September 11, 2017. 7.12, the curriculum committee meeting minutes of October 4th, 2017. And 7.13, executive session meeting minutes of September 11, 2017.
7.2 bills.
7.2 is bills, and 7.3 is acceptance, FYI 17 audit report. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as listed?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Fisher?
Yes.
Essing?
Yes.
Butler?
Yes.
Knopfinger?
Yes.
McNutt?
Yes.
Armstrong?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes. Motion carries, thank you. Moving on to action items. Action items 8.1 personnel, hiring of the certified nurse.
It's, you won't see anything on there yet. Okay,
Go ahead.
I can help you with
All right.
this. I mentioned before that we're an aircraft carrier. That turned too quickly for our school. We aren't there yet. We need you to go ahead and table this. We'll bring somebody for you in November. Okay, we're still trying to work through the last pieces of getting a nurse hired.
And it was, okay, so that's tabled till we get more information. 8.12 is non-certified employment. That would be the recommendation of the Board of Education to approve the appointment of Corey Lyons as full-time temporary skilled maintenance worker at the rate of $22.50 per hour. And these can all be done together, they won't be separate. 8.12B, approve the employment of David Spillman for the bus driver. 8.12C, approve employment of Mike Sluter as a bus driver. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation under action item 8.12A, 8.12B, and 8.12C, 8.12C for certified employment as presented? Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on those? Can you give us any background on?
I don't know about the third one.
I'm surprised you want to be a bus driver.
In all these positions, these are good people that will do the job for us.
Why are we hiring someone full-time temporary for 6 months?
Corey was hired 6 months ago to fill, we've got a member that's out on work comp leave. And so we thought that that would be resolved within that 6 months. Unfortunately, it hasn't been resolved, so we currently have someone in that spot until that position gets resolved. We just classify it as a temporary. So, and then on the other two, they have been doing, it takes a while to get trained as a certified bus driver. Dave Spillman's been doing it. And we added another full-time route. And so Mike Sluter has driven a bus for us for many, many years. He's graciously accepted to do more of a full-time route, so that's why he's come on board.
Is this Mr. Sluter?
Yes, it is.
Who used to be Dean?
Yes.
He was the
Student service.
Yeah, I took his job.
I don't think about it.
Yeah.
You don't know that. I don't know that for sure yet.
That's true, that's true.
There's still hope.
If there's no other discussion, roll call please.
Knopfinger?
Yes.
McNabb?
Yes.
Armstrong?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Essing?
Yes.
Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries, thank you. Moving on to 8.13.
Okay, and if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here again.
Okay.
8.1.3.A. We're going to bring somebody in November. We're not quite ready yet.
So we'll remove that one from the recommendation. 8.13B, approve employment of Lori Kinsinger for International Sponsor Club.
Lori is Lee Kinsinger's wife. She's done a great job for us as an aide over the years. She'll do a tremendous job with us.
And then that position currently doesn't have a sponsor.
It does not have a sponsor, and we've been asking.
So we're going to make a recommendation for, approve the recommendation under action item 8.13B to approve Lori Kinsinger as International Club sponsor.
Move.
Second. Motion is second. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call please.
Armstrong?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Essing?
Yes.
Butler?
Yes.
Knopfinger?
Yes.
McNabb?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 8.14, leave of absence request. Katie Ortiz, thank you. Dr. Quinn, do you want to say anything about that?
Needs a little time off.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation for the leave of request for Katie Ortiz?
So moved. Second.
Motion and second, roll call please.
Butler,
Yes.
Knopfinger.
Yes.
McNutt.
Yes.
Armstrong.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Essex.
Motion carries, thank you.
No executive
We have no
session.
executive session tonight, so we just need a motion for adjournment of the regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second. Motion and second, roll call please.
Essex.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes.
Knopfinger.
Yes.
McNutt.
Yes.
Armstrong. Ward.
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Okay, meeting's over, thank you very much.